The morning Carol discovered what her husband had done, she was standing at the kitchen counter in their home in Charlotte, North Carolina, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Marcus was in the study with the door pulled halfway shut, talking to his mother on the phone. Carol wasn't trying to listen, but Marcus had stopped being careful.
She has no
She
idea.
has no idea, he said.
And honestly,
honestly,
even if she figures it out, what is she going to do?
What is she going to do? She heard him laugh. Easy. Relaxed. The laugh of a man who believed he had already won. Carol finished pouring her coffee. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. She just stood there thinking. That is exactly the question, Marcus. What am I going to do? She already knew. He just didn't yet. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Carol had been married to Marcus for 9 years. They met in Atlanta when she was 31 and he was 36. He was not the loudest man in any room. He was the one standing just outside the noise, calm, attentive, asking the right questions. That was the thing about Marcus. He made Carol feel like she was the only person he could see. They married 2 years after they met. Carol was working as a senior contracts administrator for a commercial property management firm in Charlotte, where they eventually settled. Marcus sold financial services products, insurance, annuities, that category. He was good at it. He understood how to read people, how to find the angle that made someone feel comfortable handing over something valuable. Carol had admired that about him for years. It took her a long time to understand that skill had no off switch. They bought their house in year 3 of their marriage. A 4-bedroom colonial on the east side of Charlotte. Carol's commute, Carol's school district research, Carol's idea. She was the one who found the listing. She was the one who sat down with the comparable sales and negotiated the seller down $14,000. She was the one who read every page of the disclosure packet while Marcus watched a game in the next room. Carol loved that house the way you love something you built. Not because it was beautiful, though it was. Because it represented something she had worked towards since she was a girl growing up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Memphis, watching her mother stretch every dollar and still come up short. That house meant she had made it somewhere solid. It meant she had something that couldn't be taken. She was wrong about that last part. The first sign came quietly, the way early damage always does. About a year after they moved in, Marcus's mother, Beverly, began visiting more frequently. Carol had no strong feelings about Beverly in either direction. Beverly was courteous to Carol's face and watchful in a way Carol noticed but didn't examine. She would walk through the home slowly, pausing in rooms, running a hand along a wall, looking out windows. Once, standing in the hallway outside the master bedroom, Beverly said softly, almost to herself, "This is a solid house. Real bones." Carol remembered thinking, what a strange thing to say in someone else's home. She filed it away. Carol had always been a filer. She noticed things, labeled them, stored them somewhere organized in the back of her mind. It was what made her good at her job. She just hadn't turned that skill fully on her own life yet. The second sign came through paperwork. That is usually where the truth lives. Not in conversations, not in arguments, but in documents, in the quiet language of forms and filings that most people never read carefully enough. Carol handled most of their household administration. Marcus had always been what she privately called selectively forgetful, meticulous with his clients' paperwork, careless with theirs. So Carol managed the bills, the insurance renewals, the tax documents. It was simply more efficient. One afternoon, going through the mail, Carol found their homeowner's insurance renewal. The policy number was the same. The coverage hadn't changed, but the name on the declaration page had been updated. Not to both of them. Not to Carol alone. To Beverly Holt, Marcus's mother. Carol sat with that piece of paper for a long time. Then she put it back in the envelope and went back to making dinner. She didn't say a word. She just started paying a different kind of attention. Here is something Carol knew from work that most people never think to apply to their own lives. Property records in this country are public. You do not need a lawyer to access them. You go to your county assessor's website, type in the address, and the documents are there. The full recorded history of who has owned what, and when, and how it changed hands. Carol typed in their address on a Wednesday evening while Marcus was at a client dinner. The deed came up immediately. 14 months earlier, during a week Carol remembered clearly because she had been consumed with a major contract audit at work. A quitclaim transfer had been recorded on their property. Marcus's ownership share had been transferred from his name to Beverly's. Carol's name had never appeared on the deed at all. She read it twice. Then she closed the laptop. Carol had been paying the mortgage on a house she did not legally own. She had replaced the water heater in a house that did not belong to her. She had put in a new back deck, repainted every room, and paid for a complete kitchen renovation out of her personal savings, in a house that, on paper, was Beverly Holt's property. Marcus had handled the original closing. Carol had been traveling for work that week. He had brought home documents and told her they were standard signature requirements. She had signed them at the kitchen table while he stood there and watched. They were not standard. Carol made dinner that night. She set the table. When Marcus came home, she asked about his client dinner. She listened. She laughed once when he said something mildly funny. And somewhere behind all of that, something in her went very quiet and very clear. Carol wanted to be honest about something, and she said so to the one person she eventually trusted with the full story. When she understood what Marcus had done, really understood it, not just as a legal fact, but as a choice he had made deliberately, repeatedly, while looking her in the eye, she felt it the way you feel a fall. That sudden dropping sensation, the ground gone. 9 years. He had been her husband for 9 years. She had sat beside him at his father's funeral. She had driven him to a medical procedure he was too embarrassed to tell anyone else about. She had been the person he called first when his business nearly collapsed in 2019 and he needed someone to hold the fear with him. She had been that person. And in return, while she was at work, while she was trusting him to handle things, he had quietly moved the most valuable thing they owned out from under her. She felt that, deeply, completely, and then she made a decision. Anger is real, and anger is right, and anger by itself is not a plan. Carol had watched enough disputes at work to understand what happens when someone confronts before they are ready. The other side adjusts, repositions, lawyers up, moves assets. Emotion without strategy is a gift to the person who wronged you. It hands them back the advantage. So Carol did not confront Marcus. She did not call Beverly. She did not cry in front of either of them. She made an appointment. Carol found a family law and real estate attorney in Concord, 2 towns over from Charlotte. No one Marcus had ever met. No one connected to any firm they had used before. She paid for the consultation out of her personal account in cash. She laid the documents on the desk. The attorney read carefully. Then she looked up. She explained that in North Carolina, a marital asset transfer conducted without the knowledge or consent of the other spouse can be challenged as a fraudulent transfer, particularly when the receiving party, in this case, Beverly, accepted the transfer with knowledge of the marriage. The quitclaim mechanism, while fast and quiet, carries no warranty and creates significant title complications when challenged. Then the attorney asked about the mortgage. Carol told her it was in both their names, Marcus's and hers. Always had been. The attorney was quiet for a moment. He transferred the asset, she said slowly, but kept her on the liability. She set her pen down. That, she said, is a serious problem for him. Here is why that mattered. You cannot have a clean, sellable, transferable property when there is an active mortgage held by someone who does not own it. It creates what is called a cloud on the title. The property becomes legally encumbered. You cannot sell it. You cannot refinance it. You cannot use it as collateral. You cannot do anything with it until every party on that mortgage either agrees to a resolution or a court orders one. And Carol had no intention of agreeing to anything that did not fully account for 9 years of documented financial contribution. Carol spent 11 weeks living exactly as she had before. She paid the mortgage on time. She kept the house maintained. She had dinner with Beverly in October and asked about her church choir. She smiled the correct amount. Internally, she was building a record so thorough it took her attorney's paralegal 4 hours to organize it. Every mortgage payment from day one. Every home improvement project, dated and receipted. The new water heater. The deck. The kitchen renovation. The full exterior paint job Carol had funded the summer Marcus said money was tight. It added up to a number that surprised even her attorney. Not because the individual items were large, but because there were so many of them. Year after year, consistently, Carol had been investing in a property she did not know she didn't own. Her attorney called the documentation simply exceptional. In November, on a Tuesday morning, Carol filed a formal notice with the mortgage lender, a qualified written request flagging a title discrepancy and requesting a full audit of the deed chain on the property. Lenders take these seriously. A clouded title affects their collateral. Within 4 weeks, the account had been flagged. All transactions on the property were frozen pending resolution. Beverly found out first. She had attempted to use the house as collateral for a loan and been told the property was under active legal review. She called Marcus. Marcus came home that evening, and he was not himself. He stood in the kitchen doorway and said, "Did you file something with the bank?" Carol was reading. She looked up. "I flagged a discrepancy in the deed," she said calmly. "Were you aware there was a discrepancy?" He looked at her for a long moment, calculating, reading the room the way he always did with difficult clients, looking for the angle. He said, "Carol, we need to talk about the house." She said, "I imagine we do." There was no screaming, no dishes thrown, no dramatic confrontation scene where years of betrayal came pouring out across the kitchen floor. What happened instead was 4 months of structured legal negotiation, conducted almost entirely through attorneys, document by document, number by number. Marcus's position was weak from the beginning. He had signed the quitclaim. He could not claim ignorance. He could not produce any documentation of Carol's consent because she had not consented. He could not remove her from the mortgage without her agreement or a court order. And Carol was not agreeing to anything that did not address her full equity claim, her contribution history, and the financial harm created by the transfer. Beverly's position was worse. She held title to a property that was now formally disputed, obtained through a mechanism Carol's attorney argued constituted fraudulent transfer under North Carolina marital property law. Beverly could not sell, could not borrow against it, could not transfer it again cleanly. Every month the property sat frozen, the mortgage still had to be paid. Marcus paid it, alone, on a house he no longer owned, could not access, and could not resolve without Carol's signature. That is an uncomfortable place to live. The settlement was reached the following June. The specific terms were confidential. What Carol would say, to the one person she trusted with the story, was this: she left that marriage with a financial outcome that reflected 9 years of real contribution. Her name came off the mortgage. The property dispute was resolved through the courts. Marcus and Beverly were left to untangle the title situation themselves, which required an additional 6 months and a second attorney. Beverly no longer owns the house in Charlotte. The legal costs required a sale. Carol doesn't know where Marcus lives now. She knows it isn't there. People who heard what happened to Carol asked her, "Weren't you devastated?" The honest answer was yes. She was. She still carried it. In the way that certain losses don't fully close. They just become something you hold more quietly over time. 9 years of a life built with someone is not a small thing to grieve, even when that someone turned out to be a different person than the one you believed you married. But Carol also knew this. The people who designed these quiet betrayals, the slow repositioning, the documents you were never meant to read, the assumptions built entirely on your trust and your patience, they count on a specific response. They expect the explosion, the confrontation before you're ready, the grief that makes you act before you fully understand. They have prepared for that version of you. What they have not prepared for is the version of you that reads the documents, that pulls the deed, that finds an attorney 2 towns over and pays cash for the consultation, that smiles across the dinner table and asks about the choir while quietly building a case that will take 11 weeks to complete and 4 months to resolve in court. The most dangerous assumption anyone can make is that a woman's silence means she doesn't understand what's happening to her. Sometimes that silence means she understands everything, and she is simply deciding when and how to respond. Carol still thinks about that morning in the kitchen, Marcus's voice drifting from the other room. She has no idea, and even if she figures it out, what is she going to do? Marcus, of all people, should have known better than to underestimate a woman who had spent 15 years reading contracts for a living. Carol knew exactly what she was going to do. She just let him believe otherwise until it was too late to matter. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you trusted, drop a word in the comments so others can learn from you.